A relationship is meant to be a mirror, not a prison. It should reflect back to you your potential, your worth, your individuality, not strip them away. But many people live unaware, entangled in relationships that quietly poison their soul. They confuse comfort with connection, attachment with love, and control with care. What Jung teaches us is that the unconscious reveals itself in every bond we form, and if we are not aware of its signals, we end up trapped in patterns of destruction rather than growth. A toxic relationship is not always loud, dramatic, or filled with visible abuse. Often, it is subtle, disguised as affection, hidden under the surface of dependency. These are the most dangerous because they erode your spirit without you noticing. To free yourself, you must first recognize the signs. A relationship that nourishes the soul is one that enlarges you, that gives you the sense of becoming more, not less. When you stand beside someone who truly values your being, you feel like the walls of your own limitations begin to dissolve. Your thoughts feel freer, your feelings more alive, your ambitions more attainable. But when you are entangled in a toxic bond, the opposite happens. Instead of expansion, there is contraction. Instead of growth, there is diminishment. You find yourself slowly shrinking under the weight of another's presence, as though your very existence is being pressed into a smaller and smaller corner. This shrinking is often subtle at first. Perhaps they make a joke at your expense and dismiss it as harmless. Perhaps they dismiss your dreams as unrealistic, not because they know the truth, but because they fear your independence. Or perhaps they always find ways to highlight your flaws while ignoring your strengths. Over time, these seemingly small acts accumulate. Each remark is a drop of poison that seeps into your psyche, and before long, you begin to believe them. You doubt yourself. You silence yourself. You second-guess every instinct. The voice within that once spoke with clarity becomes muffled, drowned by the endless echo of their judgment. Jung would remind us that this is not merely about the partner's behavior, but about the way the unconscious interacts with such treatment. The psyche absorbs what it is repeatedly fed. If someone constantly tells you that you are too much or not enough, eventually a part of you internalizes this belief. You become your own jailer, repeating the criticisms long after they have spoken. This is how toxic relationships infiltrate the soul. They turn external diminishment into internal truth. The tragedy is that love is supposed to be the opposite of this. Love is meant to make you feel larger, not smaller. It should bring forth hidden parts of your potential, encouraging you to explore, to risk, to express without fear. Real intimacy makes you feel seen, not judged, supported, not diminished. When you are truly loved, you discover courage in yourself you did not know you had. But when love is corrupted by toxicity, you lose parts of yourself instead. This shrinking of the self is one of the clearest and most painful signs that you are not in a healthy bond. For no matter how much affection is offered, no matter how convincing the moments of tenderness, if you consistently feel reduced in the presence of another, the relationship is wounding you. The soul knows when it is being starved. And once you recognize that your spirit is being diminished, you must confront the truth. This is not love. It is dependency disguised as affection. The path back to wholeness begins with reclaiming your size, your voice, your space in the world. Control in a toxic relationship rarely shows itself in obvious commands or brute force. More often, it emerges in subtle ways, dressed in the clothes of care, concern, or even love. It whispers, "I only want what's best for you," while beneath that softness lies a desire to dominate, to bend your will to theirs. One of the most insidious tools for this kind of control is guilt. The toxic partner learns quickly what you value, what you fear, and what you cannot bear to lose. They use this knowledge not to support you, but to manipulate you. Guilt becomes their currency. When you assert independence, they accuse you of selfishness. When you say no, they remind you of everything they've done for you, as though love were a debt that must be repaid. When you prioritize your own needs, they paint you as uncaring, disloyal, or cold. The message is always the same: you are wrong to exist for yourself, and only right when you exist for them. Over time, this conditioning corrodes your sense of self. You no longer act out of freedom, but out of fear. Fear of disappointing them, fear of conflict, fear of being abandoned. This is not love. It is possession. It thrives not on reciprocity, but on power. For what is true love if not the freedom for both souls to unfold? In contrast, fear-based love suffocates. It forces you into a role, into a script where you are cast as the guilty party, always apologizing, always adjusting, always bending to the will of another. And the irony is that the more you give in, the more they take, for guilt has no end. It is a bottomless pit into which your energy, your joy, your very identity is poured. Jung would say that this dynamic reveals a projection at work. The toxic partner, unable to confront their own insecurity, casts it onto you. They fear losing control, so they bind you with invisible chains. They cannot bear their own inadequacy, so they manipulate you into carrying it. But by accepting their guilt, you are unconsciously colluding in their shadow. You become a container for their unacknowledged darkness. The tragedy is that many who live under such control mistake it for devotion. They confuse manipulation with care, submission with love. They tell themselves that sacrifice is proof of loyalty, when in fact it is proof of enslavement. But beneath this pattern, your unconscious knows the truth. It resists, it rebels. It whispers through your restlessness, through your anxiety, through the silent ache that reminds you love should not feel like fear. The moment you recognize that guilt and fear are being used against you, the illusion begins to break. For no matter how tender the mask, control is control, and love cannot coexist with it. To stay under such influence is to deny your freedom, and to deny your freedom is to deny your very soul. There is a truth that the unconscious reveals long before the conscious mind admits it. Certain people drain us, while others replenish us. When you are in the presence of someone who is healthy for your psyche, you feel lighter, more centered, more capable of facing the challenges of life. But when you are entangled in a toxic relationship, the opposite occurs. Instead of being restored by the connection, you are continually depleted. It is as though every interaction siphons energy from your being, leaving you hollow and fatigued. This is not always visible on the surface. It hides in subtle ways. You may rationalize it by telling yourself you are stressed, overworked, or simply tired. But deep down, your body and spirit know the truth: the relationship is consuming you. One of the clearest signs of this drain is the sense of heaviness you feel after being with the person. Conversations that should be nourishing instead leave you restless and uneasy. Arguments, even when resolved, leave behind a residue of bitterness. Even moments of calm feel fragile, as if they could collapse at the slightest disruption. You walk away not energized, but anxious, carrying with you a weight that was not yours to bear. The unconscious interprets this as danger, sending signals through tension in your chest, headaches, exhaustion, or even disturbed sleep. It is the psyche's way of warning you something here is deeply wrong. In Jung's understanding, relationships are not neutral. They are psychic exchanges. Every bond is a flow of energy, a movement between two souls. When this flow is mutual and balanced, both people grow. But when one continually takes without giving, the balance is broken. You become the vessel into which the other pours their frustrations, their insecurities, their unresolved shadow. Instead of meeting you as an equal, they unconsciously use you as a container for what they cannot face in themselves. And slowly, your spirit begins to erode under the weight of carrying what was never yours. The danger of this dynamic is that it is easy to normalize. You convince yourself that this exhaustion is the price of love, that all relationships require sacrifice. But sacrifice is not the same as depletion. In a healthy bond, sacrifice still leaves room for renewal, for joy, for shared strength. In a toxic one, sacrifice only breeds emptiness. You begin to live on reserve, always running low, always trying to give from a well that is already dry. What makes this even more dangerous is that when you are drained consistently, you lose clarity. You become too tired to question, too wary to resist. You fall into patterns of silence, avoidance, or denial simply because you do not have the energy to confront the truth. And this is precisely how toxicity sustains itself. Not through dramatic explosions, but through the slow, quiet draining of your vitality until you no longer have the strength to walk away. At its core, love is meant to be a source of renewal. It should replenish your spirit, not deplete it. If the bond you are in leaves you emptier with each passing day, then it is not love, it is consumption. And the longer you remain in it, the more you risk losing the very essence of yourself. To Jung, the measure of any true relationship lies not in how well two people share their light, but in how deeply they can endure and embrace each other's shadow. For the shadow is the hidden self, the storehouse of all that is denied, repressed, or deemed unworthy by consciousness. To love someone without allowing space for their shadow is to love a mask, not a person. And yet, in toxic relationships, this is precisely what occurs. There is no room for the hidden parts of you to exist. The partner demands perfection, conformity, or relentless positivity, and anything less is met with judgment, punishment, or withdrawal of affection. In such relationships, you quickly learn to conceal. You hide your anger, your sadness, your doubts. You silence your flaws, bury your mistakes, and present only the side of yourself that feels acceptable. At first, this mask may seem like a small compromise, a way to keep peace. But slowly, the mask becomes your prison. The more you deny your shadow, the more fragmented you become. A part of your psyche is forced into exile, and this exile drains you of authenticity. You begin to live not as yourself, but as an actor in someone else's play. Jung warned that what is rejected in the conscious mind does not disappear. It returns in distorted form. When your shadow is not accepted within the relationship, it leaks out as resentment, passive aggression, or sudden outbursts you cannot control. You feel guilty for these eruptions, but they are inevitable. The psyche refuses to be silenced forever. The tragedy is that instead of meeting compassion, your eruptions meet more criticism, reinforcing the cycle of repression. Thus, the toxic partner not only denies your shadow, but teaches you to fear it. This is destructive because intimacy without shadow is not intimacy at all. True connection requires vulnerability, the courage to reveal your imperfection, your wounds, your fears. In a healthy relationship, the shadow is not judged but integrated. You are free to be both strong and weak, both bright and broken. You are allowed to stumble without fear of being discarded. It is in this acceptance that love deepens, for it is easy to love someone's light but profound to love their darkness as well. In a toxic bond, however, the absence of this acceptance ensures that intimacy remains shallow. You are trapped in performance, always striving to be what the other desires, never what you truly are. Over time, this denial of the shadow erodes not just the relationship but the self. For the soul cannot thrive where it is not seen in its wholeness. The refusal to allow space for the shadow is not just a sign of toxicity. It is a sign that what you are experiencing is not love. It is control, conditional approval masquerading as care. And until you recognize that your wholeness is non-negotiable, you remain at risk of losing yourself entirely in the effort to be acceptable. One of the most corrosive dynamics in a toxic relationship is the slow, almost invisible way in which you are asked to sacrifice your identity for approval. At first, it may feel small and harmless. Perhaps you adjust your opinions to avoid conflict, or you hold back parts of your personality to keep the peace. Maybe you dress differently, speak differently, or alter your ambitions ever so slightly to gain their acceptance. But over time, these small compromises accumulate into something far more dangerous, a gradual erosion of who you truly are. The hunger for approval is one of the most powerful forces in the human psyche. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek validation from those around us, to believe that love must be earned through compliance. When this conditioning meets a toxic partner, it becomes a weapon. They withhold affection until you bend. They criticize until you change. They reward you only when you conform to their image of who you should be. Approval becomes a leash, and you, desperate for connection, learn to walk within its limits. The tragedy of this is that you begin to betray yourself in order to be loved. You silence the parts of you that are authentic in favor of the parts that are acceptable. You begin to measure your worth not by your own standards, but by their reactions. Slowly, your identity dissolves into theirs. You no longer know where you end and they begin. The relationship consumes not only your time and energy, but also your very sense of selfhood. Jung warned that the greatest danger of this pattern is that it cuts you off from individuation, the process of becoming the fullest expression of yourself. A relationship that demands you abandon your individuality is not only unhealthy but soul-crushing. For individuation requires freedom, the freedom to explore your thoughts, to follow your instincts, to grow in directions that may not always please others. Without this, you remain stuck in psychological immaturity, dependent on external approval for your sense of worth. What is most insidious is that this dynamic can feel like love. The desire for approval is mistaken for intimacy. The sacrifices you make are rationalized as devotion. You tell yourself that this is what it means to care, to compromise, to sustain a bond. But beneath these rationalizations lies the painful truth: you are slowly disappearing. And the more you give up, the more approval becomes conditional, never unconditional. No matter how much you mold yourself, it is never enough. When you lose yourself for approval, you are not being loved. You are being controlled. For true love does not require you to amputate parts of your being to remain worthy. It celebrates your wholeness, even the parts that are inconvenient, difficult, or misunderstood. To sacrifice your identity is to sacrifice the very core of your humanity, and no bond, no matter how tender it appears, can justify such a loss. In every toxic relationship, there exists an imbalance of power that distorts the very nature of love. Instead of two individuals meeting as equals, one partner assumes a position of dominance while the other is pushed into submission. This imbalance may not always look dramatic on the surface. It does not always arrive with shouting, violence, or blatant control. Sometimes it is far more subtle, a constant prioritization of one person's needs, desires, and emotions at the expense of the other. Slowly, the relationship becomes a stage where only one actor is allowed to shine, while the other is reduced to a shadow in the background. This imbalance feeds on the illusion of harmony. The dominant partner creates the conditions their opinions hold more weight, their comfort becomes the focus, their dissatisfaction becomes the guiding force. And the submissive partner, often driven by love, fear, or a hunger for approval, learns to adjust, compromise, and silence themselves in order to maintain peace. At first, this may feel like sacrifice, the natural give and take of any bond. But over time, the sacrifices are no longer mutual, they flow in one direction only. Jung would say that such relationships reflect not love but archetypal possession. One partner becomes inflated, identifying with the role of authority, while the other is diminished, unconsciously accepting the role of servant. This is not a union of souls but a distortion of them. For when the balance of power is lost, love cannot grow. It becomes replaced by dependency, fear, and silent resentment. The most dangerous part of this imbalance is how normal it begins to feel. The submissive partner may convince themselves that they are simply more patient, more understanding, or more selfless. They may rationalize that the dominant one just has a stronger personality or needs more care. But beneath these justifications lies a truth too painful to admit. They are losing themselves in the process. And the dominant partner, often unaware of their own shadow, continues to consume more without ever questioning the fairness of the dynamic. This imbalance of power also poisons intimacy. For intimacy requires mutual vulnerability, but power dynamics thrive on hierarchy. The one who dominates cannot risk true openness, for it would threaten their control. The one who submits cannot risk honesty, for it would invite punishment or rejection. Thus, the relationship becomes a performance rather than a connection, a ritual of roles, not a meeting of souls. The danger, then, is not only the pain of inequality, but the erosion of authenticity. To remain in such an imbalance is to deny your worth, to accept that your needs and voice matter less. Over time, this erodes not only the relationship but the very foundations of your psyche, for the soul was not made to live in servitude. True love does not elevate one while diminishing the other. It is born only when both stand side by side, equal in worth, free in spirit, and unafraid to share the whole truth of themselves. There is one sign that often arrives quietly, like a whisper in the night, but it is perhaps the most decisive of them all. Your intuition begins to warn you. Long before your conscious mind admits that a relationship is toxic, your unconscious knows. It sends signals in the form of unease, dreams that disturb you, moments of anxiety you cannot explain, or a subtle tightening in your chest when you are near the person. These are not accidents. They are the psyche's way of speaking, reminding you that something essential is out of balance. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through symbols, instincts, and bodily sensations, often long before reason can catch up. When you ignore these warnings, you betray not only your intuition, but the very part of yourself that seeks to protect you. In toxic relationships, intuition often becomes the first casualty. You are told you are overreacting, too sensitive, imagining things. The partner dismisses your feelings, turning your inner voice into something you learn to distrust. Slowly, you begin to doubt yourself. Each time you sense dishonesty, manipulation, or emotional harm, you push it aside in favor of the story. You want to believe that love will fix everything, that the other person will change, that your unease is just weakness. But intuition is never weakness. It is the soul's alarm, an inner compass that points toward truth even when you refuse to see it. The longer you ignore this compass, the more lost you become. You begin to rationalize, to create elaborate justifications for behaviors that deep down you know are wrong. You may even project blame onto yourself, convincing yourself that you are the problem, that your insecurities are clouding your vision. This self-deception is one of the cruelest effects of toxicity. You not only lose trust in the other, but you lose trust in yourself. And when trust in the self is gone, escape feels impossible. But there is another side to this warning. Intuition, though quiet, is relentless. It will not stop whispering until you pay attention. The dreams become louder, the unease sharper, the body more restless. If you allow yourself to listen, if you create even a moment of silence and honesty, you will hear the truth that the relationship is draining you, consuming you, and leading you further away from your authentic path. Jung would call this the voice of the self, the archetype of wholeness, urging you toward integration, even if it requires pain. The choice, then, is whether to continue silencing this voice or to heed it. To listen is frightening, because it means facing change, loss, and uncertainty. But to ignore it is to walk further into illusion, where the cost is not only your happiness but your very soul. For the unconscious will not be denied forever. It will find ways to awaken you, whether through suffering, breakdown, or crisis. And so, when your intuition warns you, it is not to torment you, it is to save you. It is the inner reminder that you were not born to live in chains, but to live in truth, even if truth requires you to walk away.